Your show will go live in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to the At The Eyepiece Show. This is an astronomy-based podcast that is devoted to discussing astronomical equipment, stargazing tips, observing reports, and equipment reviews. We don't focus on the science of astronomy. There are plenty of shows that do that. The focus of At The Eyepiece is the visual observers, those backyard stargazers that enjoy taking their telescopes under the stars, and those individuals wishing to join our ranks. After all, what matters to stargazers is what's at the eyepiece. Well, good evening once again, my fellow backyard stargazers, and welcome to this episode of At The Eyepiece. I'm your host, John Kramer. I'm going to be with you here for the next approximately 30 minutes for a live show. Yes, we are live on Blog Talk Radio right now, /At The Eyepiece. And of course, we're on the Google Plus Hangout. For those individuals that have Google Plus, it permits you to go ahead and get a little bit more visual feedback, obviously, because we are doing it live on the air. And I got some exciting things here to show you too. So hopefully, no matter if you're going to listen to this as a podcast, you'll be able to get some good information from it as well. But also, you can go ahead later on, check out this episode on the YouTube channel as well. Just look up At The Eyepiece or John Kramer, and I can go ahead and show you those as well. But I'm excited. It seems like it's been forever since we've been able to do a live episode here, and I'm just thrilled that on here today is Sunday, October 14th for you. And we'll be here if you want to go ahead and call in to participate into the show. Our guest call-in number is 760-454-1129. Now, I have been just a busy bee with a lot of things going on personally, a lot of work, so haven't had a whole lot of time to go ahead and put forth into the show or into some of the wonderful audio tours of the month, which, by the way, I want to thank the wonderful feedback that I've gotten from individuals really appreciating the audio tours of the month that we've been putting together as a separate downloadable podcast. But in addition to that, we've also had the downloadable Sky Safari observing lists that are available to you as well. All you got to do is send me an email at theeyepiece@gmail.com, and I'll forward you the particular observing list so that you too, while you're out at the eyepiece of your own telescope, can go ahead and follow along on the audio tour. Now, as I've said, I've been really swamped with work and personal things going on, as well as not very good weather, actually, for quite some time. So this month's October audio tour of the month is going to be probably a bit delayed, probably going to have to skip October and go into November. So we'll get that as soon as local sky conditions for me here in Middle Tennessee improve to the point where I can put together a nice audio tour, and you, of course, will be the first to know it. Go ahead and post that up as a separate podcast, and I will put together the Sky Safari observing list for you. Now, on a side note, that's pretty much what I've been doing. Haven't had a lot of opportunity to observe myself, at least during the evening times, but as the title to this show kind of gives you a hint, we will be talking about a new scope for me. Remains to be seen if I will keep it, but we'll check that out here. I'm going to go ahead and pretty much do a detailed review of it as much as I possibly can. That's the Coronado Solar Max 2 60mm dedicated hydrogen alpha scope that I'll show to you here in a bit, and I'll begin to talk about here on the podcast as well. But as always, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about some interesting news for fellow backyard stargazers. Well, since we're kind of hinting here on equipment, let's go ahead and talk about some interesting equipment that's out there now and some interesting things that I have found. I came along this with cloudy nights. There's a post here regarding a new super zoom eyepiece, 15mm 0.8 to 7.9. Now, there's a lot of zoom eyepieces out there, but this one has a consistent 66-degree field of view, something very, very unique. And it comes to us from APM telescopes. This is a German company, but they do have vendors and distribution here in the United States from what I'm aware of here. And it is, like I said, pretty unique in its capabilities of offering a very consistent field of view all the way through the different focal lengths and magnification ranges for this particular zoom. I don't see a whole lot yet on pricing here, but as far as American dollars, it says it's going to be about 300, looks like, let's see, 300 euros or less. We'll go ahead and get confirmation of any price later on that I could go ahead and find out for you. But if you're interested in a zoom, you might want to consider holding off and seeing this particular one here with the consistent 66-degree field of view might just be exactly what you're looking for. Now, many of you know, because I've talked about it quite a few times, that I own an Apertura AD12. And those scopes, of course, are direct from OpticSmart. Now, I'm not associated with OpticSmart in any way, shape, or form. I'm not paid or they don't even advertise here on the show, but as many of you know, as I've talked about different products and different companies before, I like to talk about and certainly get the word out there about products, companies, and services that benefit the astronomical community, for which I'm certainly a member of. And OpticSmart has come out with one of these accessories for Dobsonian users that you just kind of sit back and say, thank goodness somebody has come out with this. Bravo to OpticSmart for doing it. And it's called the Halo. This is a setting circle leveling base for different aperture Dobsonian telescopes. It's at a price. Now, what if you perhaps don't know what that is? Essentially, what you're doing is on the base of the telescope, you're setting up this telescope, leveling it on this base, and it has degree settings on it. In addition to that, sold separately, you'll need an inclinometer, I believe it's called. It gives you the digital readout of degrees vertical that your scope's pointing. I picked up one. They're very, very economical. I think I paid like 20 bucks for mine. And it gives a digital readout of the angle for which the scope is pointing. Conveniently sits right there next to the finder scope. And with an application such as Sky Safari or any number of applications that you may have out there for your iPod or your Android phone or your tablet, etc., most of those applications give you the readout in real time of certain deep sky objects in both azimuth and altitude. And that's where the Halo comes into place. No modifications to your scope whatsoever. You just purchase this base for it, level the base, set the scope inside of this base, and it already has the level, the compass, so you can find the north there, and all of the degrees so that you can go ahead and then turn your scope in the correct azimuth direction, and then using the sold separate inclinometer, go ahead and find your angle and look through the eyepiece, and boom, there is your target. One of the modifications out there that I've been thinking of doing for the scope is exactly that, and guess what? OpticSmart goes ahead and comes up with a looks like a fantastic design of the Halo here. And for those of you on the Google Plus Hangout here or catching this video, I'm going to go ahead and share this up here through a quick screen share. and that way you can go ahead and see it too. So hopefully if you're listening to this as a podcast later on, you can go ahead and check it out for yourself. So this is a halo, very well designed looking piece of equipment, nice and sharp looking. They got plenty of pictures here below to go ahead and highlight the capabilities of it. So really wonderful, wonderful stuff from OpticSmart. So I have to give my hats off to them, and a great design and bringing something that is truly beneficial to the amateur astronomers out there, such as myself. So back to other topics here. I'm going to go ahead and also, and yes, I do hope to be able to purchase one of these halos here, probably not for a while, but go ahead and do a detailed product showcase on that. Now, speaking of product showcase, this is something that I've been wanting to do for a little while, and I think it would be a great thing to go ahead and offer, and that is the At The Eyepiece product showcase. Very, very briefly, this is going to be the opportunity for me to talk about a variety of astronomical equipment and focus on just that particular item, whether it's a telescope, a mount, an eyepiece, or even a piece of software, for instance. I will probably leverage not only the Google Plus Hangout capability here, that way you get to see the object, you get to go ahead and get a good feel of it hopefully as well. But in addition, I thought it would be wonderful to go ahead and offer some type of Q&A. I think this is a really unique opportunity for those of you as we come up to the holiday season and a lot of people are looking for telescopes for themselves to purchase. I just thought it would be a really great and very unique opportunity to have a dedicated product showcase off and on, so where if you would like to look at this particular Dobsonian that I own, and ask, you know, how's the movement or how's the clearance of the eyepiece, for instance, on a Meade LS8, go ahead and ask those questions in real time and get real-time feedback on that as well. In addition to that, I'll certainly be covering eyepieces and such, but of course it's limited to the equipment that I personally own. But I still think it would be a lot of fun to go ahead and do and talk about different equipment, almost like a mini review of sorts, but more or less kind of showcasing the product. So I will go ahead and start announcing those, hopefully within the next couple of weeks as well. So one of the main topics here, let's go ahead and talk about what's going on as far as observing out there. And let's go ahead and start off with, there is a new comet out there worth considering. It is Comet Hergenrother, and it is designated Comet 168P. Hergenrother. Right now it's magnitude 10th. It's going through an unexpected brightening, and this particular comet is located just wonderfully for us right now within the Great Square of Pegasus. Of course, that constellation is riding very high this time of year, and with that unexpected brightening throughout the month of October, it should go ahead and put on a fine view for you to go ahead and consider and get at the eyepiece of your own telescope. So be sure to check that out. Now I will go ahead and also share the link here. You just find information on it through a number of online sites here. I myself brought up the particular article from Sky and Telescope. So looking forward to the next time, and with the new moon right about now, it's a great opportunity for you to track down this comet. Now also coming up here is another comet, but that's going to put on a show, well, kind of in the future here. And let me see if I have that. There's going to be a new sun-skirting comet, could put on a dazzling show in 2013. This is brought to, this comes from Universe Today here. And the comet is named C2012 S1 ISON. And it was actually discovered by a Russian team using the International Scientific Optical Network. That's the ISON designation. So this comet, we do have quite a ways off for it to go ahead and get pretty bright. It's currently at magnitude 18 and only visible in larger scopes. But They do anticipate it surviving its close call with the sun and perhaps putting on, quote, a dazzling display in 2013. So certainly looking forward. It's always awesome to have some comets coming up for us to go ahead and enjoy. Now, speaking of the sun and sun-grazing comets, perhaps, well, of course, let's talk about our closest star, the sun itself, and what we have available on there to observe. There's a number of good sunspots or active regions visible right now for you to enjoy. As always, we want to go ahead and make sure that you're observing the sun safely and with the proper type of equipment. Never look at the sun with your unaided eye or in just your typical telescope, binoculars, etc. You must go ahead and have a very specialized sun filter, solar filter, or a dedicated hydrogen alpha scope. So just keep that in mind. It looks like we have a nice region here, 1586, which is just about in the center line of the sun, very well visible for us to go ahead and scrutinize. From what I can tell from images, it looks like your very typical, somewhat large, but not overly large sunspot with a nice dark umbra, and of course your active or your lighter region around that, the penumbra. Now, this active region really got my interest peaked when I saw it kind of coming up around from the limb. This is active region 1589. It's not as dark as 1586 as far as the sunspot, but it is a region that is much larger. Lots of smaller activity in this particular region, so it's really going to be kind of interesting. It also looks like there's a lot of plaque around it too. Now, speaking of these white areas called plaque, there's another active region, sunspot region, coming from the limb. This is 1591, and this one does look very exciting in the images that I can tell offhand. It looks like it has a very nice dark sunspot, umbra, penumbra, but lots of plaque region around it, and it could be very similar in visual appearance coming up, such as with 1589. There is a smaller region there as well, not quite as large as 1586, but still worthwhile to go ahead and consider. This is active region 1590. And it is probably the smallest region currently visible on the sun, but it does also have a nice smaller sunspot region with dark umbra, of course your lighter penumbra around it, and a plaque region as well. So that's what's going on the sun today, and of course I'm very, very excited to go ahead and know that we have some very cool things coming up on the sun because, well, I've taken kind of the plunge in solar astronomy and went ahead and purchased a dedicated hydrogen alpha telescope. Now let me share a little bit about the journey for this because it wasn't something that I just really went into without much thought process. I actually did some extensive posts on cloudy nights asking for input, as well, of course, as ask pretty much the expert out there in the field, I think, for solar astronomy, and that, of course, is Stephen Ramsden with the Charlie Bates Solar Astronomy Project. And yes, I want to go ahead and get a solar astronomy or a solar telescope that's dedicated to hydrogen alpha for the main purpose, really, of doing solar astronomy outreach. Now, as I said, this was a decision that really I wrestled with for quite some time, and it was, of course, two main vendors out there for hydrogen alpha, Lunt and Coronado. Now, of course, you also have, with the 60 millimeter range, which is a nice middle ground range, you have the larger 80s, 90s, even Lunt makes 100 and 152 millimeter dedicated hydrogen alpha telescope, which I'm going to dream on for that, right? But at the entry-level position, you also have two entry-level telescopes offered by both of those vendors. One, of course, is the Coronado PST. This is one I have to admit, has been really wrestled very hard not to lean towards the Coronado PST, because there are just so many awesome imagers out there doing some fantastic things with the Coronado PST. One of those, if you have a Google account, or I'm sorry, a YouTube account, one of the folks that you're really going to be blown away with what they're doing with hydrogen alpha, in particular the Coronado PST, is look up helium-3 fusions channel. And I'm going to do a quick screen share of this for those individuals that are in the Google Hangout. And what really captivated me is that this is with a Coronado PST. And this is a live view. And you can see from the Coronado PST live view, I think this is actually the double stack. I'll get more into that here in a little bit. But you can really, really see the filaments. These are essentially prominences, but viewed edge on, like from the disk perspective, rather than prominences on the outer edge of the sun itself. So these show up very, very dark here in his images with the Coronado PST. PST is a 40 millimeter scope, very, very entry level for hydrogen alpha, and a very economical price point of about $6.99. So you can get into hydrogen alpha with something like this pretty economical. Lunt also offers another offering themselves with their entry-level hydrogen alpha. And for those of you that are going to be on the Google Hangout here, you're catching that video here right now. This is, if you want to look up some Lunt LS 35 millimeter videos and images, just look up, looks like WOJMAR3, their channel. They have done just fantastic stuff with the Lunt 35, and of course 35 means 35 millimeter objective. Very small objectives, but for the sun, you don't necessarily need something very, very large, right? Because you're going to be the sun's pretty large in the field of view anyway. But certainly with the larger aperture, you're increasing your resolution. So that was an argument that was presented by a lot of people in the forums, especially as you're getting into solar astronomy, is to go ahead up to the 60 millimeter size. Now, I can understand that. I mean, let's face it, being amateur astronomers, we're always going to go ahead and recommend folks step up into larger and larger apertures. I was actually kind of surprised that that too mirrors the dark sky observing, where they just want you to get the largest aperture possible. But let's go ahead and let's bring in a little bit here of the Coronado PST as we are wrapping up some of the show here, and I'll give you some initial impressions. It comes with this case. Now, I will say that the case is adequate. It's not a very heavy-duty case, but it's a sharp case nonetheless, and it does a good job at giving you some protection for your investment. Now, once you go ahead and you open the case up, of course, you are greeted with the Coronado 60 millimeter, and this has a BF10, by the way. BF stands for blocking filter. They come in a number of sizes, and from what I've gained from my initial inquiry of all this hydrogen alpha stuff, is that if for visual, the BF600 or smaller is fine, but if you're going to be imaging, you want to get at least a BF10, preferably larger. This particular version is the BF10 because I do hope to do both visual with outreach as well as imaging with outreaches too. I'm glad that it came with the dedicated Coronado 25 millimeter CMAX eyepiece as well. I've seen a lot of these come with the Kellner eyepieces, and they don't, well, they just look rather cheap, but this one looks pretty nice. Now with this case, it's pretty tight fit. As you can see, I'm probably straining a little bit to lift the scope out. And with that, I will put it over here on the side and initially tell you that I do like the case, but it's a very, very snug fit. Now, this is the scope itself for those of you on the Google Hangout. And I will tell you that I really do love the look of the Coronados. I love the black and the gold. It just is a nice, sharp-looking instrument. Right off the bat, too, I will tell you that it is a very well put together instrument. It is heavy. I don't have the exact specs on the weight, but I would have to say it's at least pushing maybe 8 pounds by itself. It's pretty substantial. Now, because of the weight, well, let me show you here. It includes the soul finder here at the very, very top. Of course, this is to help you locate the sun. You may think that trying to locate the sun in an instrument isn't going to be pretty, or is going to be pretty easy, but you'll be surprised at actually how difficult it is. Even with the 8-inch instrument, the Schmidt-Cassegrain that I have, that I use primarily for white light, I use the shadow to try and get the sun in the eyepiece, and it can be quite a challenge. So this gives you a pretty easy way of getting the sun in there. One of the drawbacks, though, you do actually have to somewhat look at the sun with it, so just be mindful of that. You have this nice clamshell here that goes around the scope itself. Very, very hardy, I would say, and well put together. This mechanism here, as we approach the rear end of the scope, is actually the Etalon tuning mechanism. This is for you to tune the filter to get the best possible contrast with either the surface detail that you're going for, such as the filaments, plaques, active regions, etc., or to go ahead and go for the prominences that are right on the disc itself. This mechanism moves up and down for you to do that. Now, kind of the thing with Coronado, and one thing that I'm still kind of concerned about, frankly, is the focus mechanism. You'll notice that it does not have your traditional type of rack and pinion or Crawford style focuser. It uses a helical focuser. You release these two pins here and you slide out, lock in place, and then you use this rubber dial portion here to obtain your fine focus. Now, I'm initially concerned with the weight of the eyepieces on here and how much sagging or binding that will cause. So I will certainly be reporting on that, but so far it does feel very, very good, very solid. I would certainly say that my initial impressions of the scope is solid all the way around. Of course, you got the business end of the scope here, nice blue coated objective with the internal mechanism there, probably not visible. Well, yeah, you could probably see that through the Google Hangout. That mechanism is dead center, and that does go ahead and what tunes, it's a tilt tune mechanism, by the way, tunes to the best possible image of the sun itself. Now, of course, this diagonal here, this, I believe, is where your blocking filter is, your BF10 filter is. And there's just a little bit of fuzziness that I see here on the diagonal and the eye cap guard here. I want to be very mindful of that, especially when I take it off and I put the eyepiece in there. It looks like it came mostly from the case itself. So just be mindful of that. It's a very snug fit in the case, very snug. If I decide to go ahead and keep this scope after giving it a good run through here, one of the things that I'm probably going to do is give it a little bit extra room there, especially where the diagonal is, so that it will move freely and not get all this little particles here, which obviously will be kind of a mess. So I am desperately looking forward to first light report here with the Coronado PST, but I will tell you my initial impressions of the overall fit are very good. It looks to be an excellent build quality. It's very heavy, so consider that for your mounting. That's one of the big concerns with me is actually mounting this. For outreach, I wanted to mount this on top of my 8-inch Schmidt-Cassegrain for white light and have this mounted on the top. It does have, by the way, 3 pre-drilled holes here on the bottom that are standard, what is that, 1.25 inch for tripod mounting, etc. I do have a camera
10 seconds.
piggyback adapter on my scope that I was actually hoping to utilize with this, but I'm really kind of questioning that now. So hopefully I won't have the additional expense, but actually it's kind of looking like I probably will, of actually getting a some type of like guide scope, piggyback scope type of setup for the Coronado PST. Overall, I'm pretty impressed with it so far. It's going to be put through its paces, both visually as well as photographically. And very recent, I went ahead and picked up a dedicated astronomy camera for that as well. And we will be talking about this camera later on in a future episode, and no doubt on a future product showcase as well as the Coronado PST. We're talking about the DMK-21. Now, this is an older camera purchased used off some astronomy classifieds. I think it was Cloudy Nights classifieds. This is a monochrome camera, and of course monochrome is fine because the sun obviously is only giving light off in one color as far as hydrogen alpha is concerned, and why not just use all of your dedicated pixels for resolution rather than giving you color? I can go ahead and tweak the color with post-processing, etc. But you'll be hearing a lot about me and this telescope in episodes to come. So I want you to go ahead and ensure that you continue to check back here at the Eyepiece. And I know I've been very neglectful on the blog, just so busy, but I do hope to go ahead and put up some dedicated blog posts on this instrument as well. And of course, one of the most fundamental reasons that I purchased it was outreach. And I really am curious about how easy people find viewing the solar images through this 60mm objective versus, say, a PST. I know a number of people in the area, part of the Bernard Seaford Astronomical Society, that do astronomy outreach, solar astronomy outreach with their PSTs, really curious on how this performs next to it. So that will also be coming up as well for more future show topics on that. That's going to be a wrap for this week's episode. Boy, 30 minutes kind of flies by, but I sure hope that I've tantalized you here a little bit on the Coronado 60mm Solar Max 2 telescope, and much more to come with that. I just need these clouds, rain, and wind to get out of here. Of course, the new scope curse is alive and well, not only for nighttime observers, but it appears daytime solar observers as well, because I'm just socked in with plenty of thick cloud cover. But until then, here's wishing you clear skies so we can all talk about it next time at the Eyepiece. Thank you for listening to this episode of At the Eyepiece. If you would like to participate in a future show as a featured guest, or perhaps you have suggestions for future show topics, send me an email at theeyepiece@gmail.com. Check out our blog at theeyepiece.blogspot.com. We're also on Facebook and Twitter. Just put in a search for At the Eyepiece. I'd like to thank George Wood for his bumper and exit music. This is 8-Bit Junkie, and we obtain that from podsafeaudio.com. So here's wishing all of you plenty of clear skies so that we can all talk about it next time at the Eyepiece.